Knowing Harry's reputation for leaking everything to the press, you could be forgiven for wondering whether they may have been involved in doing this, although that would be an act of Harry Curie.
Now, the question is, has King Charles been played by Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan?
What I can tell you is this was taken last Wednesday, right? So prior to that, 4 days in advance, somebody went along to the club to secure that outside spot.
Look at the actual spot where this is on the side of the building. It's obviously under a tree. See, this is really specific.
There it was, clear as day. A crisp, full-color image plastered across the front page of a major tabloid. Prince Harry's top aide, King Charles's comms chief, and Meghan Markle's handpicked PR powerhouse, all seated together on a sunlit balcony in central London. A so-called peace summit, caught mid-laugh, mid-toast, in what tabloids hailed as a private, hopeful breakthrough. But within hours, the mood shifted. Because once people zoomed in, once they really looked, questions exploded like wildfire.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle leaked this. King Charles, how long had I been warning you? Do not play their game. Do not bring these two traitors back into the fold.
The angle was too sharp, the clarity was too precise, the timing suspiciously perfect. This wasn't a grainy paparazzi ambush from a bush. This was a staged shot from a known controlled vantage point directly across Green Park. And the moment skeptics realized that the usual credit line had been scrubbed off the photo, no agency, no named pap, just the paper's exclusive banner, alarm bells went off inside the palace and across royal commentary channels worldwide. Because here's what insiders are now alleging: Meghan Markle's camp planted this photo. Not accidentally, not sloppily, but with absolute intent.
And sure enough, just days after those initial peace talks, which I don't think should be taking place anyway, the front page of the Mail on Sunday splashes the details, bylined by a reporter called Charlotte Griffiths, who has spent the past few months, let's be totally honest, doing Prince Harry's bidding.
A calculated strike of visual propaganda, designed to flip the narrative, signal relevance, and above all show the world that she and Harry were still orbiting the throne, still in proximity to royal power. And for King Charles, it may have felt like betrayal wrapped in a glass of sparkling water. His own trusted advisor, Tobin Andrea, caught in the shot, sipping alongside Meghan's UK media handler, Liam Maguire, and communications chief Meredith Maines, just days after the Wales family dominated headlines with that glowing Wimbledon appearance. Suddenly, instead of Prince George and Princess Charlotte's front row magic, the focus shifted back to Meghan, back to Harry. What was supposed to be a discreet, cautious reconnection now looked like a tabloid rollout, a stunt. And if that's true, then who's really calling the shots behind the Sussex curtain? Because according to one former Fleet Street editor, this photo didn't just leak, it was handed over, on a silver platter, to a journalist known for pro-Harry puff pieces. But that was only the beginning.
Well, my experience of these things is that you wouldn't necessarily find people sitting there unless they wanted to be photographed and had tipped somebody off that they were going to be there, because paparazzi, generally speaking, don't hang around in Green Park.
4 days. That's how far in advance, according to sources close to the club, the reservation was placed for that specific balcony table. Not just any table either. It was the only outdoor table with a direct line of sight from the opposite side of Green Park. And here's the kicker. The reservation was made under a generic name, no titles, no red flags, but the person who placed it, tied to a known associate of Meghan's public relations team. That alone raised eyebrows for insiders familiar with royal scheduling, because nobody gets that table midweek without connections, and nobody sits there unshielded, especially not someone as high up as the king's own communications secretary, unless they believe they're safe from scrutiny. But they weren't, not even close. The photo, once splashed across print and digital platforms, became an instant flashpoint, not just for its timing eclipsing the Wimbledon weekend and the Wales family's golden photo op, but for what was missing. Anyone who's spent time in media, especially in royal coverage, knows the drill. Published photos are legally required to show credit. It's about rights, about accountability. You'll always see something like photo by Backrid or Splash News exclusive. Not this time. This one? Just the words exclusive to tabloid name, and that's it. The credit had been stripped, or more likely never listed, because the photographer wasn't a standard agency pap lurking for celebrity chaos. He was a staff photographer, on payroll, embedded.
Can you imagine if you're sitting down and you see people look, you look immediately, right? It's like, what are you looking at? But
and that's why it was so obviously Meghan as well, because Meghan knows.
And that, according to royal aides, changes everything. Because when a major newspaper uses a salaried photographer to capture a supposedly accidental moment between palace and Sussex emissaries, it means someone knew, someone arranged it, and someone had full sign-off. So what are royal insiders saying? One source bluntly put it this way: you don't get that clean a frame from that distance without knowing where to aim and when. This was a shoot, not a shot. According to another former royal correspondent, the real giveaway was the composition itself. The way the glassware on the table glinted just slightly from the angle of the late afternoon sun. The way every face was visible, nothing obscured by plants, pillars, or sunshades. That's how you know, they said. That's how you always know. Someone cleared that scene. And if the photo was staged, if the reconciliation meeting was meant to be private but wound up a headline instead, then either the palace has a leak, or Meghan's team is running circles around the monarchy's comms division. Some are already whispering that it wasn't just the table that was booked early. The photographer was too. Park permits, security logistics, a silent green light from someone inside. This wasn't clumsy, it was coordinated. And now royal aides are reportedly scrambling to trace the paper trail. Who placed the reservation? Who signed off on the guest list? And why were there no countermeasures in place? No umbrellas, no shielding, no indoor alternative? Because if the reconciliation summit was indeed a PR setup, then Meghan may have just played the palace like a piano. And yet, that's not even the most shocking part.
A heavy lift to do a deck that's going to get sold. She was expecting that to be magicked up like that. She wanted ideas. I'm sorry, I thought she was the originator. I thought she was the genius. I thought she had so much to say and has been finding her voice. Where the F is her voice? Where did she leave it behind? I feel like we need an all points bulletin for Meghan Markle's voice.
The woman seated beside Liam Maguire on that now infamous balcony, that was Meredith Maines, Meghan Markle's newly minted chief communications officer. And the moment her identity was confirmed, royal insiders reportedly gasped, because up until that photo dropped, Maines was practically invisible in the British press. A quiet hire based out of California, with Silicon Valley credentials and very little known involvement in UK media strategy. Yet suddenly, there she was, center frame, smiling calmly while the palace comms chief looked like he'd seen a ghost. And Liam? He's supposed to be the Sussex's bridge to British press relations, someone who until now had managed to avoid controversy. But the image of him seated so casually alongside both Maines and the king's top advisor set off a chain reaction. Why? Because now the optics were undeniable. Meghan had planted both feet back in royal territory, not just figuratively, strategically. Let's rewind. Meredith Maines isn't just a corporate PR rep. She's been described as a high-level fixer, former tech exec, Google adjacent, knows her way around narrative control like a veteran campaign strategist. She reportedly joined Meghan's team quietly earlier this year, just as the Duchess began testing a rebrand with soft-focus Instagram videos, baby mama choreography, and pink-hued product launches. Insiders now claim Maines had one mission: repair the brand. Not the monarchy's, Meghan's. That's why this photo is raising more than just eyebrows. Because Maines being present at this private summit doesn't just suggest she was brought in late, it suggests she engineered the whole thing. A setup to prove, once and for all, that Meghan and Harry still have access. That the palace is still answering their calls. That the doors of diplomacy are cracked open, even if only barely. And Liam? His appearance in the photo allegedly wasn't just coincidental either.
Team Sussex is understood to be frustrated after details of a peace summit were revealed in a newspaper, denying it was behind the leak.
One source familiar with recent Sussex media moves said Liam's job was supposed to be limited to coordinating press, not attending talks, not showing up in the middle of royal negotiations. His being there sends a signal. This wasn't just a family catch-up. This was brand repositioning, a public display of proximity. Because whether or not Meghan ever steps foot in Kensington again, she knows one thing: an image is forever. And that single shot, 3 power players, drinks in hand, seated on royal turf, was a message. To Netflix, to Spotify, to every luxury brand hesitating to sign on. It said, we're still in the room. Now, according to those close to the palace, Maine's presence was never cleared through official channels. No heads up, no coordination with the king's staff. Tobin Andre, an old-school press strategist known for his discretion, was reportedly staggered to see himself on the front page, which only fueled speculation that Maines and Maguire had outmaneuvered the monarchy's media handlers. And as one former comms advisor put it bluntly, they were outplayed. Maines brought Silicon Valley PR warfare to the royal courtyard, and nobody at the palace saw it coming. But this calculated photo op didn't just blindside the king's team, it set off a chain reaction inside the firm that no one was prepared for. By the time the photo made its way across newsstands, social feeds, and royal group chats, one man's name had already been dragged into the center of the chaos: Tobin Andre, the king's personal director of communications. A man known for his silence, his polish, and above all, his loyalty to the crown. And yet there he was, sitting out in the open, on a public-facing balcony, with 2 of Meghan Markle's most trusted PR operatives. Sources say Tobin didn't even realize what had happened until until he saw his own face on the front page. One insider described the moment as devastating, not because he had done anything wrong, but because of what it suggested. That he, the king's media gatekeeper, had either sanctioned or stumbled into a Sussex-led ambush. And worse, that the palace looked weak. Let's be clear, Tobin Andrea is no rookie. He came up through Fleet Street, navigating scandals, royal rifts, and tabloid firestorms. He knows how quickly a photo can shift public sentiment. He knows when a story is being framed, and he allegedly knew within seconds of seeing that image. This wasn't just a leak, it was a message, and he was in it.
Senior aides working for the King and Prince Harry took the first steps towards rapprochement by holding sensitive talks last week. The meeting at a private members club in central London was an extraordinary development in relations between the two royal households, which have been almost non-existent in recent years.
So now the burning question inside the palace wasn't just who leaked this. It was how did Tobin get played? Royal aides scrambled to do damage control. At first, there was speculation that the balcony meeting had been planned with Charles's blessing, that maybe this was part of a larger strategy to slowly bring Harry back into the fold. But that theory crumbled quickly once insiders confirmed William hadn't been looped in. No representatives from Kensington, no one from Catherine's side, not even a whisper of inclusion. According to a well-placed source, if this were legitimate diplomacy, William would have been informed. But he wasn't, which means this wasn't a palace initiative, it was a Sussex operation. And Tobin got caught in the crossfire. Some within the royal circle are now wondering why Tobin was even outside. Why risk being visible? Why not move the conversation indoors, where privacy could be guaranteed? One former palace staffer offered a brutal take. He thought he was safe. He trusted the setting. That balcony has served royals for decades as a quiet meeting point. But that only works when everyone present is playing by the same rules. And Meghan? Well, she's known for rewriting the rules. Sources say she's made a habit of taking traditionally off-limits spaces and flipping them into opportunity zones. From birthing her first child without royal press access to debuting her products on Instagram instead of through official royal channels, she's always preferred her own narrative, not the monarchy's. So if this meeting was a trap, it fits the pattern. And Tobin, unwittingly or not, became the proof. His presence gave the moment credibility, legitimacy, a palace official seated with Team Sussex. That was all the headline needed to explode. Now the palace faces a bitter truth. One of their own was lured into a very public trap. And for King Charles, the timing could not have been worse, because the very next person to react was his firstborn son. Prince William didn't need a briefing. He didn't need a meeting, a memo, or even a phone call. The moment he saw that balcony photo, insiders say his jaw tightened and the room fell silent. Because for William, this wasn't just about optics. It was about principle, about trust, about the one line he had begged the palace never to cross. And yet, there it was. Harry's people, Meghan's strategists, and the king's own top aide, all captured mid-conversation, mid-reconciliation, and mid-backstab.
And Charlotte Griffiths, the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, over the past few months has been responsible for a succession of stories, all trying to make Prince Harry look better.
As far as William was concerned, according to royal insiders, William had issued repeated warnings about reopening any formal doors to Harry and Meghan, especially now, with Catherine undergoing treatment, the children growing older, and the couple's public support surging following the Wimbledon appearance. It was a peak moment. The tide had turned. The public was with them, and then that Sunday morning, while the Wales family graced back pages with warm smiles and legacy-building grace, the front pages were dominated by Sussex drama once again. A single photo undid weeks of careful narrative, and according to one senior aide, William was absolutely livid. He warned this would happen, the source said. He told them, every time you let them back in, they take it straight to the press. This was no different, only now, it wasn't just Harry who betrayed the moment. It was staffers from inside the palace who helped set the stage, whether they knew it or not, and behind closed doors. The fallout was immediate. William reportedly skipped out on an internal debrief that Monday morning. One aide claims he stormed out after learning that the king had given a soft green light to a possible face-to-face talk with Harry later this year. Another insider said his words were uncharacteristically sharp. If this is how we're playing it, don't expect me to clean up the mess. Tensions between father and son have flared before. But this, sources say, hit differently. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the timing. This was supposed to be Catherine's week, their family's moment. The one chance in months where the spotlight was purely theirs. Instead, a staged Sussex stunt hijacked the narrative, again. And it's not just emotional, it's strategic. William has spent years rebuilding the monarchy's image alongside Catherine, one polished appearance, one dignified project at a time. They play the long game, no Netflix scandals, no ghost-written memoirs, just slow, steady, earned respect. Harry and Meghan, by contrast, play fast, flashy, high risk. They don't build goodwill, they hijack it. That's how William sees it. And this photo, in his eyes, was the ultimate hijacking. Now there's talk that he's drawing a firmer line than ever before. No joint appearances, no diplomatic middle ground, and absolutely no involvement in whatever meetings Charles wants to hold. Because William's made his position clear, they don't change. And this balcony stunt, it just proved his point. But while William fumed behind palace walls, someone else may have been facing an even bigger crisis. Because rumors are swirling that Harry didn't show up to talk reconciliation. He showed up to ask for something. At first glance, it looked like a casual drink, a warm summer sit-down, maybe a symbolic thaw between two fractured royal households. But behind the forced smiles and clinking glasses, insiders are now whispering about a very different agenda. According to multiple sources, Prince Harry didn't just come to London to talk peace. He came asking for help. Financial help. The timing, once again, is everything. Harry is reportedly staring down the barrel of a massive legal nightmare, one that could cost him upwards of £40 million if things go sideways. His battle with British tabloids over alleged phone hacking is already backfiring in some circles. A key issue: undisclosed connections to a controversial private investigator allegedly used in the case. Legal experts have been blunt. If this isn't handled properly, Harry could not only lose, but be held liable for the other side's legal costs too. That's not just a bad look, that's financial annihilation. And now, royal insiders are saying this sudden trip to London wasn't about family, it was about funding. One source close to the palace phrased it bluntly: Harry didn't come looking for a hug, he came looking for a lifeline. And that lifeline, many believe, involves the one person who still holds sway over royal assets, King Charles. Here's where it gets messier. Harry reportedly has limited access to certain trust funds set aside during his youth, but to move anything substantial, or to draw from family-held investments, requires royal approval. Some say it even requires the king's signature. And if that's true, then the so-called reconciliation meeting may have been less about healing, and more about negotiation. Which brings us back to that now infamous balcony photo. Was it really just a public show of diplomacy, or was it Meghan's team trying to leverage the image of unity to pressure the king? Think about it. If Charles is photographed meeting Harry's people, laughing, engaging, it signals openness. And if that image circulates before money talks have concluded, that shifts public expectation. Suddenly, the pressure is on Charles to follow through, to support his son, to do the right thing. And Meghan knows exactly how to weaponize that narrative. Even more damning, some sources speculate that Harry wasn't entirely in the loop. One insider said he thought he was walking into a quiet meeting, but when those photos hit the press, he flipped. He realized he'd been used. Used by whom? The whispers point directly to Meghan. Allegedly, she orchestrated the seating, timed the outdoor appearance, and greenlit the photographer, possibly without telling Harry the full plan. And it would make sense. If Harry's legal team is telling him to play nice with the monarchy, then a photo like that works in his favor. But if Meghan wants PR leverage, it works even better in hers. The real question now is what happens if Charles says no? If the king refuses to unlock the money or publicly endorse his son, will Team Sussex leak more, release private details, or worse, frame the king as heartless while Harry drowns in legal fees? One thing's for sure, the meeting wasn't casual, and the stakes weren't small. But Meghan's motivation wasn't just about Harry's crisis, it was also about her comeback. For Meghan Markle, everything has always been about narrative. Control it, sculpt it, sell it. From royal wedding fairy tales to California reinventions, her brand has never been just about who she is, it's about who she appears to be. And according to multiple insiders, that balcony photo wasn't just a symbolic reunion with the monarchy, it was a calculated re-entry into the global spotlight. Because let's be real, Meghan's brand has been floundering. Her podcast deal imploded. Spotify pulled the plug. Netflix, though still technically under contract, is reportedly frustrated with delays, lackluster content, and dwindling public interest. Archetypes fizzled, the animated series never materialized, and her lifestyle brand is still mostly jam. Pink jam, with questionable origins and even more questionable sales. In short, the shine has worn off. And Meghan knows it. So what do you do when your relevance is slipping, your deals are drying up, and your husband is buried in lawsuits? You plant a royal moment. Sources close to the Sussex camp say the image of Meghan's team sitting at the table with the king's advisor was always intended to circulate, not just to the tabloids, but to Hollywood. She needed to prove access. One source said, "That's all that matters in LA. Who you know, who will still pick up your calls." A picture like that says, "Look, we're still connected. That's gold, especially when it's just vague enough. Because here's the genius in the setup. If it had been a formal family photo, the palace could have quashed it. If Meghan or Harry had posted it themselves, it would have looked desperate. But a leaked image taken accidentally, showing a private insider conversation, that's sophistication, that's proximity, that's power. Insiders allege Meghan's team hoped the photo would reignite media interest, rehabilitate her image in boardrooms, and most importantly, silence the growing chorus of critics calling her finished, and in a twisted way, it worked. Within 24 hours of the photo going public, her name was trending again. Royal pundits were fighting, tabloids were scrambling, TikTok sleuths were dissecting every inch of the image, who sat where, who leaned in, who knew. Suddenly, Meghan was back at the center of the conversation, not because of a product, not because of a scandal, but because of speculation. Was she back in the fold? Was there a secret deal? Could the monarchy be ready to forgive? And just like that, the jam jars and rosé bottles didn't look so silly anymore. Meghan had cloaked herself in palace prestige, without setting foot near the palace. But this wasn't just about headlines, it was about future leverage. The more Meghan can imply reconciliation, the more she can market herself as royalty redefined. It fuels the podcast pitches. It sweetens the Netflix renewals. It gives her brand life. One PR strategist put it this way: for Meghan, the biggest platform she ever had was the royal family. She's been trying to build her own stage ever since. But when the spotlight dims, she goes running back to the original power source, even if she has to fake the invitation. And if that photo was a PR mirage, it was an effective one. But then came the backlash, because the image wasn't just dissected by royal fans, it was pulled apart by media insiders, and what they found was explosive. The moment the photo hit the tabloids, a very specific type of professional took notice. Not the royal watchers, not the gossip columnists, but the media analysts. The ones who've spent decades decoding PR stunts, unmasking political image control, and reverse engineering celebrity photo drops, and they all said the same thing: this wasn't an accident, this was production. First came the angle. The shot was taken from across Green Park, a known public space, using what experts estimate to be a long-range lens with a pinpoint field of vision. That level of clarity, no glare, no blur, no obstruction, takes setup. The table was positioned for visibility. The sun hit just right. Every face was turned, almost presented toward the lens. No one was facing away, not even Tobin Andre, who reportedly never sits with his back to the open during informal meetings. Then came the timing. The photo was captured late afternoon, just as the light softened, what photographers call golden hour. It's the window every professional shoots in. Less harsh, more flattering. You don't get that lighting by accident. One editorial photographer said, "That's a clocked setup. You wait for that, and the photographer, that's where things get even murkier." The image didn't come from a known paparazzi agency. It wasn't credited to Backrid, Splash, or any of the usual suspects. Instead, it bore the mark of an in-house tabloid contributor, a salaried photographer with insider access, and the lack of an agency credit wasn't a mistake. It was a signal. Because if this was a paparazzi shot, the photographer would want their name on it. Rights, royalties, syndication. But if it's been kept anonymous, with no paper trail, that screams exclusivity. That screams control. One former Fleet Street editor went so far as to call it propaganda in plain sight. She said the image is too clean. It's too perfect. If you've ever dealt with a genuine pap shot, you know it's chaos. Cars, blurs, shadows, heads turned. This was theater. Even the background raised suspicions. The terrace itself is enclosed by tall greenery and partial walls. You can't just stroll by with a camera and snap this. You need elevation. You need clearance. You need, according to insiders, a map of the layout and knowledge of the daily guest schedule. That's why the backlash wasn't just about the image. It was about what it proved. Because if Meghan's team coordinated a balcony sit-down, timed to golden hour, planted a discreet photographer, and made sure the right people were seated at the table, then that changes everything. It means this wasn't a private summit. It was a photo shoot disguised as diplomacy. And once that conclusion spread, royal insiders panicked. Not just because they had been fooled, but because the public was catching on. Suddenly, #BalconyGate was trending. Social media sleuths were pulling up maps of the Royal Overseas League, comparing the foliage, matching the railing shape, cross-referencing Tobin's shirt with past engagements. It wasn't just an image, it was a digital crime scene, and once public trust fractures, especially inside a monarchy built on controlled appearances, it's nearly impossible to glue it back together. But the consequences weren't just digital. Inside palace walls, damage was being done. Loyalties tested, lines drawn, and the next decision King Charles made could change the Sussex dynamic forever. By Monday morning, the fallout was in full swing. Inside Buckingham Palace, staffers were whispering about the photo like it was a breach of national security, because in their world, It was. A private conversation between the king's closest advisor and two of the most polarizing media operatives in royal history had been turned into a global headline, without clearance, without protection, without control. One senior courtier allegedly described the incident as a communications disaster of the highest order, not because it revealed anything explicit, but because of what it implied, that the palace had dropped its guard, and the Sussexes had walked right back through the gate. But this wasn't just a PR flub. This was a moment of reckoning, because the image gave Meghan everything she wanted: proximity, legitimacy, visibility, and left the monarchy looking passive, worse, naive. And as the story spiraled online, the calls for action from inside royal circles grew louder. One royal aide reportedly demanded a security review for all future off-site meetings. Another wanted a formal investigation into how the photo got out and who had known about the meeting. A third source close to Kensington went even further, saying, "There needs to be a hard stop. This family cannot keep walking into the same trap." Even loyalists to the king began questioning whether Toby and Andrea had been too trusting, too eager to entertain reconciliation, too willing to assume that Harry and Meghan would play fair, because they didn't. They never do, at least not in William's eyes. And on that note, William's silence spoke volumes. According to palace insiders, the Prince of Wales refused to comment directly, but his mood, ice cold. One aide said he was utterly disgusted. Another claimed he told a confidant, "I warned them." Again. And most telling of all, William reportedly cancelled his next scheduled phone call with the king. No explanation. Just cancelled. It was a silent protest, a line in the sand. Meanwhile, social media exploded. #BalconyGate hit trending lists in the UK, the US, and Australia. Meme accounts mocked the image as reconciliation cosplay. Royal fans zoomed in on Meredith Maines, comparing her posture and profile to past images of Meghan herself, asking whether the Duchess had even been there in disguise. TikTok videos with dramatic voiceovers questioned everything from the lighting to the stemware. Was that rosé? Was it a prop? Had Meghan sent a specific color scheme? Nothing was off limits. Nothing was too far-fetched. And in the background, one critical question kept echoing: what would the king do now? Because this wasn't just embarrassing, it was a test. Would he cave to emotion and allow Harry back in through unofficial channels? Or would he take William's side, shut the door, and lock it for good? Some insiders say the photo may have finally convinced Charles that there's no such thing as quiet diplomacy with the Sussexes, that any effort at peace will be weaponized, publicized, monetized. One even claimed Camilla herself had a stern word that evening, warning Charles, "You let them back in once, they'll never leave." And now, the king is allegedly reconsidering everything, including the future of Harry's titles. Because the photo may have lasted only seconds, but the fallout could stretch for years. Behind palace walls, a question is quietly gaining traction. Not was the photo staged. That much insiders say is practically a given now, but something far heavier, far more permanent. Is this it? Is this the moment King Charles finally accepts that Harry and Meghan can't be trusted with access, with appearances, with anything tied to the crown? Because at this point, even the most sympathetic courtiers are starting to admit this wasn't a simple mistake. This was strategy, optics, calculated leverage from a couple who, time and time again, turn every olive branch into ammunition. And for Charles, this is a painful crossroads. On one hand, there's the pull of family, of legacy, of the emotional need to keep the door cracked open for a son who, despite everything, is still blood. Especially now, with the king's health reportedly under constant observation, there's that deeply human urge to resolve, to mend what's been broken before time runs out. But on the other hand, there's duty, there's institution, and there's William, waiting in the wings, watching all of this unfold, knowing that he will have to deal with the consequences long after his father is gone. Multiple insiders say Charles is under mounting pressure to draw a final line, not just from William, but from senior aides, longtime palace staff, and perhaps most significantly, the Queen Consort herself. Camilla has reportedly made her stance clear behind the scenes: no more risks, no more secret summits, no more pretend diplomacy with people who never intended to keep things private. And she's not alone. The mood inside royal circles is shifting from cautious hope to weary resolve, because every time the monarchy tries to play fair, the Sussexes flip the board. And now, the conversation isn't just about this image, it's about what comes next. What else might be sitting in Meghan's camera roll? What private moments might surface if the money doesn't come through, or if Netflix needs a ratings boost? Rumor has it palace officials are quietly reviewing every contact, every calendar entry, every open loop that Harry and Meghan might still have access to. It's not exile, they've already chosen that path. It's containment, damage control, locking the doors to prevent any further staged peace. And then there's the public. For the first time in months, the narrative isn't ambiguous. It's clear. Meghan Markle's team orchestrated a chance moment that turned into a front-page PR coup and got caught red-handed. Royal supporters aren't just frustrated, they're angry. Betrayed. The comment sections are flooded with one word over and over again: enough. So what happens now? Will King Charles hold firm? Or will Harry talk his way back in again with just enough regret in his voice to buy another meeting? And what happens when that meeting becomes another tabloid exclusive? It's a question no royal wants to face, but they may not have a choice. Because as one former palace staffer put it, you only get fooled so many times before you finally close the gate. So now we're left watching, waiting, wondering, did Meghan overplay her hand? Did Harry realize too late that he was being used? And can the monarchy ever trust them again? Drop your thoughts below, like, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next video on your screen is waiting, and trust me, you won't believe what's coming next.